Welcome, everyone, to These Sci-Fi Guys. I want to introduce my two friends here. I got Chad. Say hello, Chad.
Hello.
And John. John,
What's up,
say
everyone?
hi. Hey, um, basically, what we wanted to do with this is all three of us are just science fiction fans, and we just wanted to talk and just give our opinions on movies, TV shows, video games, what have you. Today, we're going to start off with what probably most people started their science fiction journey on, which is Star Wars A New Hope. Now, I'm a little bit older than the other two guys, and I actually watched this recently on VHS. Most people don't even know what that is. That's a VHS cassette, right? And that was way before what they call the special edition. That's what everyone sees now. So, for example, at one point when Han Solo turns a corner while he's on the Death Star, there's like four stormtroopers there in the original. The one you guys all have probably seen, there's like 50 and a TIE fighter and everything else. So, the way we're going to do this is we're going to ask just a few questions and kind of go from there. So, starting with John, we're going to start with you. Tell us, who is your favorite character in A New Hope?
I definitely believe my favorite character. It either falls between the man Luke himself, or of course R2D2, because you can't get over the screams and just the sassiness of a little robot. Even though it doesn't quite show that character quite as much in A New Hope, he definitely starts to develop that personality, and I think it's amazing to see what they did with all that they had just out of a guy in a small suit. I think it's just very impressive and very funny how much personality they get out of a thing that can just turn around and do all of those things. So I definitely enjoy R2D2's personality, but definitely can't get past Luke and just the heroism behind all of that and including all of that as well. So it's between Luke and R2D2 for me.
Oh, cool. Well, Chad, I kind of know, I think I know where you're going to go. And Chad, why don't you tell us who your favorite character is?
Well, I have many, but the one I lean to the most is the Darth Vader of the type. I like the powerful scene when he comes in and just throws the person up against the wall. But I do like Luke, so I'm more on the dark side on this movie.
Well, you know, it's funny. As a kid, I loved Luke Skywalker. As an adult, I can't stand him. I'm sorry. He was just whining the whole time, it seemed like to me. But he was an 18-year-old kid, got thrust into that situation. My favorite character was Princess Leia. I know it doesn't think like that, but man, she just had leadership qualities from day one. She didn't take any malarkey from anybody. I mean, think about it. She was drugged because you saw the thing came into the detention center with the needle on it. All right. She didn't give up the rebel base and, you know, grabbed the rifle from Luke and shot a hole and said, "Let's go." You know, that's really why I liked her a lot. So let's go with the next question. The next question will be, what is something that you don't like about this show or the movie? How about Chad? We'll start with you.
What I don't like, that's just, yeah, I don't like you don't see more interactions between Obi-Wan and Vader because just that one couple scenes where they meet and that's it, and you hear Vader talking to Tarkin and like, "Hey, my old master's here. You're the only one left of the religion." So the they didn't go into an explanation of how they knew each other. And yeah, that's probably what it was meant to be, but there's no interactions. I once was your master. Now I'm routine. So
Yeah, and I think on top of that, I don't think they did enough adding on with Luke and Obi-Wan himself. I mean, they're in the Falcon. Hey, use the Force, Luke, and then next thing you know, Obi-Wan is dead.
Yeah.
So, so John, what about you? What was your
I
part
think I
you
fall
didn't care?
similar, kind of to both of those lines, just in the sense of like, I definitely think we could have seen more of Vader in general, at least more of his power. And then as a whole, even on the technical aspect, even though it was groundbreaking for its time, I mean, just to think of some of the things they could have done given the full scope and nature of like technology now, I think I would have loved to seen it taken even further. I mean, you can't get past the practical effects. I love those. I want to endear those for the rest of my life. But I would have loved to have seen even more of what they could have done without a lot of the limitations they had. I mean, they definitely broke ground with everything they had. But one of the things that, I mean, just from the technical aspect, I would have liked to have seen a lot of that. But also, I definitely don't think they certainly didn't play up Darth Vader as much as they could have, especially as they started to build canon once it grew in popularity over time. I think they definitely could have had more of that towards the beginning because he's definitely one of the more slash most powerful beings in that universe. So
I agree totally. I mean, and kind of that brings it to mind. I didn't care for the Death Star. I really thought, all right, think about it this way. Whenever they were flying up to it, they said, "Hey, that's a small moon." But yet, when they got onto the Death Star, you didn't feel like it was this huge thing until the actual fight, when they went through the trench and everything. But the actual them running around onto the Death Star, I remember one line where one of the stormtroopers said, "Hey, we think they may be breaking up. They may be on levels 5 and 6." So to me, only 6 levels, on something that large. I mean, if you've ever walked in any large city, say Atlanta, New York, or wherever, it just takes forever. So that's the one thing, they didn't have any kind of. It just seemed very convenient to have the landing bay, the political prison, the way to shut off the tractor beam, and the trash compactor all pretty much right there instead of having it over this entire moon. That's the only thing that I really didn't care for. Okay, so if you could change anything, well, actually, before we get to that, hold on. I have another question that I didn't prep you guys with first, but I'm going to ask y'all this: Who shot first? Was it Han or was it Greedo? Come on,
the
I need to.
toughest question.
All right, because you guys haven't probably seen the original. I'll show you the original. I have a small clip here. All right, let's see if this works.
Even I get bored sometimes. Do you think I had a choice? Over my dead body. Yes, I bet you have.
So you can see Greedo never fired in the original. So
No.
it was straight up hound.
Well, I mean, in all
Straight up.
fairness, too, would Greedo really have fallen if he shot first? I mean, it could have been a bad shot, but at the same time,
That's true. I mean, when you go back through, what was it? The Clone Wars, they've actually got his character in there at one point, but he's a little kid or something. Anyway, so let's go back. If you could change anything, what would you change? Let's go with you, John.
I mean, again, back to that technical aspect, but outside of that, story wise, I definitely think I would lean far more into um, the lightsaber battles because I feel like that first film lacked a lot of that um, grandeur in a sense, whereas they kind of leaned more into that later on, which again makes sense with some of the technical limitations. But I think I would have liked to have seen a lot more of the classic just duels because a lot of it came down, like you said, to the Death Star, this big object. They're always fighting and moving in ships, but I think it would have been awesome to see a lot more one-on-one action, which does make sense in the sense that they didn't have it because Luke wasn't trained yet, and really all you had was Obi-Wan and Vader there. But it still would have been nice to see a little more action back in that time.
Chad, how about you?
I kind of agree with John there. Back then you had when it came out, you had westerns, you had war movies. Everybody wanted the action, but no storyline. I would love to see more training with Luke and Obi-Wan. Like we mentioned before, is you see him on the Millennium Falcon just training the learn the moves and use the Force, and then later on you hear Obi-Wan as a ghost telling Luke, and that's where you use the Force, Luke. Use the Force. There was no other training between Obi-Wan and Luke. So if you come to think of it, how can he be use the Force without any more training?
Now, remember, we are looking at this, what, 44 years later? Because it was released in 1977. And here it is, 2013.
Oh yeah, and I mean it still stands the
2020.
test of time, but
Yeah.
it's I mean, and again, definitely hindsight 2020 and a lot of that because, I mean, Lucas probably knew he was onto a bit of a gold mine, but at the same time, I mean, they faced a lot of challenges in production and things like that. Um, I think there was probably a lot of trepidation and even entering into this kind of story and entering this grand scale idea into the world of sci-fi. And I think they had no idea what it could have grown into, but yeah, in hindsight, I think that's kind of where we're coming from. You're right. We're looking at it 40 years later. So those are just things that would be nice to see in the long run if looking back, as opposed to thinking
Right.
about their time.
Yeah, I've got a DVD set, and there's the fourth DVD is all the behind the scenes stuff, and it was a interview with George Lucas, and it's really quite fascinating how he explains that none of the networks wanted anything to do with them. They wanted nothing to do with science fiction because everything that was science fiction was Star Trek, the original series, which was in the early 60s, and it was what it was. Flash Gordon, uh, there was like some cartoons, not cartoons, but some kid shows like R2, which was basically a, a play off of another movie. And then like Space 1999. That's really about it. There was nothing groundbreaking that was huge in the movie theaters. And so when they actually built or did Star Wars, he kept all the rights for any sequels. 20th Century Fox, who is the one that was able to finance them, they were not initially involved with any of the sequels. Which brings me to my what I would change. Why have a ceremony at the end of the movie? It just didn't quite make sense to me. If you think you're going to have a sequel, let's leave it on a cliffhanger or something. Have a bunch of star destroyers just jump in out of light speed that just showed up and then they're running away. I just think something like that would have been really cool. And another pet peeve of mine is there was 4 ships that came back from the Death Star on both versions, on the original and on the special edition. So you had Wedge, who was the one that got shot earlier in the trench, and then he had to pull out. You had one Y-wing, you had Luke, and you had the Millennium Falcon. But when you're in the ceremony, there is so many people in flight suits. So it's like, where are all these people coming from?
You have ground crew. I mean, come on, Dave.
Ground crew does not wear flight
The
suits.
flight suits on ground.
I was a ground crew aircraft mechanic, and we didn't wear flight suits. The air crew wore the flight suits.
Listen, Star Wars has to make it look cool and silly somehow. You just gotta fill it in.
This is true. This is true. So that was my only pet peeve with it. I mean, again, we're looking at this 40 years later, and it was a fantastic movie. I mean, heck, I'm even wearing a Star Wars shirt. You can see behind me, I've got Star Wars, posters. I got Trek and other stuff, but science fiction as a genre uh, was totally changed after this movie. Totally. So that's really going to be art for our show. Actually, I got one more thing. I got one more thing. I got a blooper. Did you know there was a blooper in the movie and they left it in? They left it in.
Where could he be? Take over. See to him.
You guys saw it, right? The stormtrooper hits his head and they left it in. And
Knocks
actually, in the
right in.
special edition, they actually added a sound to it where it goes donk.
That's
mean,
the
it's just-
only right way to handle that. If you're going to leave the blooper in, let's acknowledge it for all of time.
I got tickled every time I see that. It's just like, well, because I know they were, after watching the special edition, the featurette, and they were supposed to release A New Hope. Actually, it was called Star Wars then. It wasn't called A New Hope. They were supposed to release it in around Christmas time of 76. And there was all kinds of production issues. I mean, when they were filming out in the desert, there was sandstorms. So there was a lot of stuff that they were like, we can't film today. And then, of course, as I said earlier, they were building sets and they were building the apparatus for the cameras and everything to fit into them. And it was a totally new way of filming. So it was groundbreaking, but it was still definitely different, and took longer than they initially thought. So,
I'll say, and overall, that's one of the huge things I give credit to the original Star Wars for. I mean, just sheer technicality and what they were able to do with even something as simple as like a part off of an old flash from a camera. I mean, that's one of the most iconic things in the world now is the lightsaber. Like, what they're able to do is just completely and utterly impressive for what they had to work with. And I think that will stand the test of time ultimately, because there aren't many modern studios, if any, that I think could handle the practical effects that happened.
oh no, everything is CGI now. I mean, if
yeah.
they were to wanted to do it, they would have made all the robots and everything just CGI'd. And what's cool was Kenny Bell. That was the guy's name that was actually in R2D2. They actually had him from day one. They were like, look, okay, you can't talk. Well, let me rephrase that. The original, they wanted him to speak English, but then they were like, no, it didn't work. That's why they did the beeps and the boops and all that other stuff. But they said, you need to show emotion without speaking, and they can't see your face. So that's why you'll see him bouncing around and twisting and all that. And the one thing in there he was showing is that he could only rotate the head about this much. If he did any more than that, the cords would actually wrap around his neck and start choking him. So he was like, you notice I would do stuff like this just because I'm like, I'm not going all the way around. But even to this day, I remember as a kid going to the theaters. I mean, this was back in 1977. I think I was 12, and or maybe I was 8. I don't remember. Anyway, but going to the theater and just being totally shocked that this was a movie, that there was anything that was like it at all. I mean, going back and looking at it and just seeing all the stuff that George Lucas wanted to put in, the Death Star battle is probably one of the most iconic battle scenes that you'll ever know. But anyway, I think that's going to be it for our show today. This is our first one, so we're just kind of learning stuff. We're trying to figure out. We want to keep it less than 30 minutes, so because some people have lives, and we keep busy. We have kids and grandkids for me, kids for everybody else, and just we have lives to get to deal along with. So, John, what is our next movie that we're going to see?
I fully believe we're going to step fully in the opposite direction in terms of the modern era, and take a look at Gravity.
Great movie. Okay, Gravity. All right, so for the next episode that we're going to do on this, we're going to watch Gravity. Actually, I'm looking forward to that. I
Yep.
haven't seen that movie in a long time. Oh, Chad, he's shaking. You've never seen it
I've
then?
never seen it.
Oh, you're in
well,
for a
enjoy, buddy.
treat. You're in for a treat. It's a good movie. All right, well, that's it. And from all of us here at These Sci-Fi Guys, we appreciate you guys listening or watching. And oh, I'm supposed to put this banner up here too. So if you guys want to go ahead and get in touch with us, you can get in touch with us on Twitter at These Sci-Fi Guys, or on our YouTube channel, which it's the same thing at These Sci-Fi Guys, or you can email us at TheseSciFiGuys.com. All right, I appreciate everyone for paying attention with us, and we'll talk at you guys later.